So today we're meeting with Don White, and the RCD archives have decided to start a little program called In Conversation RCD, so we can gather some of our veterans on media and have it in our regimental history. So today I have Don White with us, and we're talking about Holland in 1945, and it's a huge significance with the Royal Canadian Dragoons. The Dragoons were advancing into Holland, and they entered a small Dutch town called Leeuwarden. And when the Dragoons arrived, a fierce battle was still lingering in the streets as Dutch patriots and the occupying German army exchanged gunfire. With the advance of the Canadians, the Germans quickly withdrew, leaving behind large caches of arms and supplies. The Royal Canadian Dragoons liberate the town from the occupying Germans, and the civilians fill the streets to cheer and to thank the soldiers of the Royal Canadian Dragoons. Each year, this is a very significant date, the Royal Canadian Dragoons assemble annually on the 15th of April to commemorate the liberation of Leeuwarden. Today is the 14th of April, 2015, and Don was in Leeuwarden on the 15th of April, 1945. So, Don, do you remember anything about that day, or what do you remember most about that day?
Well, probably two things is the one entering the town to start with is, in my memory, it was about a quarter mile outside the town, which there weren't any buildings around. There was a cement barricade we had to go through, and we were quite apprehensive about going through it because we were sure the Germans were going to have a gun on the other side aiming at us. Well, we got through that without any action at all. And the other thing is, it was kind of a drizzly day, and we got into the town maybe 2 blocks without probably seeing anybody, not even a cat or a dog. And then before we were in the next 2 blocks, you could hardly see the ground for people.
So do you think the people thought they didn't know who you were at first?
I imagine that was it. They hadn't quite sunk in that different troops were entering the city at that time. And to this day it amazes me because within minutes there was a large quantity of Dutch flags and orange streamers, which is the royal colors of Holland, came out and were draped on the sides of the buildings.
Wow. So they knew that, did they know that the Canadians had come to?
At the first they thought we were the English.
Okay.
But it didn't take them too long to realize that we weren't English, we were Canadians.
And then they started to celebrate.
And then they started to celebrate, and it's hard for me to describe the feeling that was left with us because there seemed to be so mixed up that they were crying, they were singing, they were laughing. But you had the feeling that there had been a great burden lifted off of their shoulders, and finally they were able to be free.
That's the thing, I think, just being able to know that they're free, they're not living in fear. And what kind of vehicle? Do you remember your vehicle that you were driving?
Yeah, well, I was in the Staghound.
Mm-hmm.
The composition of the regiment in those days, there were 5 recce troops in the squadron, and each recce troop had 2 Dingles or Daimlers scout cars. There were 2-man scout cars and 2 Staghounds, which were a 5-man car.
Now,
that consisted of a troop.
So did people come to the vehicle right away, or?
Yeah, they did. They surrounded you. They wanted to shake your hand and clapped you on the back. And
so did you actually stop the vehicles?
Even
you just
the
stopped?
young girl wanted to kiss you. And that.
And your wife could understand that today, eh?
Well, I wasn't married then, so.
Oh, you weren't married then? Because Don's been married 65 years to his wife, Chris, so that's why I'm. So you were 19 years old?
Yeah, I was 20 that year, but yeah.
And the village, so did you stop the vehicles and get out, or did you continue on, or?
We were kind of, no, we didn't get out of the vehicles. We were kind of in the village, and we kind of, I don't know really any order of semblance that we went through, but we kind of nosed around and finally got up to where the town hall was. And then there was a burgomaster came out on the steps of the town and proceeded to give a great speech, which we didn't understand one word of it.
Oh, it was all in Dutch?
Yeah, we didn't know whether to tell us to get out, we don't like you, or we're happy to have you. But anyway, and then we stuck around for, I would say, half an hour roughly. And the headquarters troop came in, and then they kind of took over the whatever administration had to go on at that time, because it was funny. The Dutch people, some of them were actually collaborators with the Germans, and of course the ones that were truly Dutch didn't like them or hated them, and they wanted to have some reprisals against them, so you had to kind of be a police force as well as a liberating force in there. But we didn't have any of that, because our orders came that we were supposed to go on to the next town called Franeker.
And did you do that?
Yes, we accomplished that day. Yeah.
And I don't know if you mentioned what squadron you were in. Did you?
Charlie Squadron.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the Charlie Squadron. And I know that you had sent me an email, the story of that day, which we have in our archives as well. And I think you've pretty well talked about all that today. About, you know, and then Mr. Wilkins, in conversation shortly before he died, said he could still hear the people singing.
Yeah.
Right, because everyone was overjoyed.
Yeah, it was just a feeling that I find it unable to describe in true words. Yeah.
So you feel a lot of connection with our regiment because of that, eh?
Yes, I do. I've always kept in touch with the regiment, and I feel very honored to be an RCD. I'm very proud of the regiment, the way they're performing today too, and so.
And Don did donate an orange banner to the regiment. I don't have a picture with me, but a few years ago, eh? The original streamer.
Well, I got that in Leeuwarden. That was given to me by one of the Dutch girls in Leeuwarden, and for some reason or other I tucked it away, and so 50 years later I discovered it, and then I decided maybe it should be here with the regiment. So
we have it framed now. Well, Don got it framed.
Yeah.
The original streamer that he brought through, that was given to him 15th of April 1945, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And if you want to mention what's happening to you in May, you could do that too with your family. This year.
We're going to have at least I'm going to have the great honor of going back for the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the town of Leeuwarden, and I'm going to be accompanied by my wife, my 3 children, and a representative from the regiment by the name of Matt Taylor, and that's making me real proud.
So how many years later you're returning, eh?
70 years. Yeah.
70 years later.
Yeah, so that's great. After we left Leeuwarden, we went down to Franeker, but the bridge was blown on the canal before we could enter the town of Franeker, and the Dutch underground cobbled up a bridge that was good enough we could get our vehicles over, and we went over into the town and got welcomed there, the same as in Leeuwarden. And we had to stay there. Oh, we were supposed to go in advance on towards Harlington. Well, when we pulled outside of Harlington, then we really got fired on it, and then we knew that we weren't going any farther that day, so we threw the smoke out and got back into Franeker. And then the word came, you stay there till you get relieved. So we stuck around there till another regiment came up and relieved us. And then we went back and billeted it in Leeuwarden for that night. Well, 10 years later, I worked in a store. And 10 years later, a fellow came into the store and we got talking. And he said, I remember you.
Oh,
and I
wow.
said, no, you don't. Yes, I do. He said, I remember you. You waited till we built a bridge over the canal in Franeker to get into the town. And he came in, fella was
That's amazing.
Helped build that bridge. And came to Canada 10 years later. We met up in our store.
Yeah. Connect with people in strange places, eh?
Yeah. Well, I can't believe Matt Taylor's going back with us.
Yay! That's great.
Well, getting away from the liberation of Leeuwarden, there was another exercise we went through, and it was in the Springbok that came out this year, and it talked about there was some POWs in a hospital that we liberated, and it so happened to be our troop too. Had orders to go up and take this bridge over a canal, and we proceeded up to it, or nearly to it, and lo and behold, there was some activity up in front of us, and it seemed to be a bunch of people dressed in white, and then next thing we saw stretchers, and as we observed, we could see the Germans were taking some nurses and doctors and patients from the hospital and lining them up across the road in front of us.
Wow.
And then we didn't know what to do, so kind of halted and we're just kind of observing things. The next thing we know, we see the Germans coming out and going across the bridge, except for 4 or 5 that were still containing the patients and doctors. And we, of course, didn't dare fire to do anything about the situation, even although we were ordered to take the bridge. And there's 2 things happened, but our officer, for some reason to this day I don't know, because we were sporadically getting fired on, that he got out of the vehicle, his stag hound, he got down to kind of observe. Well, then there was a lot of firing, and he couldn't get back in, so he had a rap on the side of the door to his driver. Newt Funk was his driver's name, to let him in the side door to get back up into his vehicle. Well, then afterwards the Germans blew the bridge, because the ones that were holding the hostages ran across the bridge, and they blew the bridge and disappeared. Well, then of course we got up and we went in to the parking lot of this hospital. When I say a hospital, it was like a cottage hospital, just 1 story, and it was fairly long and along the canal bank. And we turned around, and he got out and went in, and then he came back and said, there's prisoners in there.
Oh, no.
Now, I never knew to this till when I read the articles, there was 20 of them there, and I just thought maybe there's 5 or 8 or whatever, but finally I found out there was 20 there. So.
And who were the prisoners? Who were they?
I'm not even sure.
I'm not
I
sure.
think they were mainly Allied flyers, Air Force guys,
Wow.
as far as I know. So that's a little antidote to this story.
That's a wonderful story.
And that happened about 3 days before we went into Leeuwarden, I think.
Those stories are...
Maybe the archive, or the adjutant's reports would have it closer to what I'm telling you, but...
That's pretty close if you were actually there.
Yeah. Well, I mean to the time-wise.
Yeah. It's incredible that you were actually saw a bridge blown up.
Yeah. And couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah. The Germans were smart though, eh?
Yep, they were.
They knew how to...
Of course, while we were standing there, there's some guy creeping down the ditch with a Panzerfaust to blow us up. We didn't know. We were pretty cautious of that.
So you survived that, and then later on you went down to...
Down to Leeuwarden.